All right, this is the muscles of the shoulder lecture. We're going to break up the muscles of the upper limb into shoulder and then arm and forearm. So this is about the muscles of the shoulder specifically. The key with muscles of the shoulder is superficial muscles of the back went axial to appendicular. So they did control the shoulder and they controlled the scapula. But when we say muscles of the shoulder, we're talking about muscles that go from the scapula out to the humerus. So we're definitely talking about moving the shoulder joint versus moving the scapula. So the independent muscles of the shoulder are the deltoid, Teres Major, and Coracobrachialis. These three muscles move the shoulder in completely different ways, which is why I refer to them as the independent muscles of the shoulder. We're going to start with the deltoid. Here's a photograph. This is the 3/4 size muscle model. He stands and he's on wheels in the lab. So I have the arrow pointing here to the deltoid muscle. The key with the deltoid muscle is it's actually a triangle that wraps around. Its origin is from the clavicle, the lateral third of the clavicle, to the acromion, to the spine of the scapula. We have a saying, where trapezius ends, deltoid begins. And you can actually see trapezius here where my arrow is now. It ends there on that spine of the scapula, and therefore that's where deltoid begins. The insertion of the deltoid is on the deltoid tuberosity. You may remember from the humerus lecture that I said you had to know where the deltoid tuberosity is. It is the insertion of the deltoid. Its action is multiple. It is going to be involved in rotation of the shoulder, depending on which piece of the shoulder we have. It will flex the shoulder anteriorly, but its main action is abduction of the shoulder, which means if you want to raise your arm, your shoulder out to the lateral side in the coronal plane, you need deltoid. Deltoid is the powerful mover, but it cannot start this motion. It must have a synergist. Its innervation, we're finally going to get to the named nerves. The named nerve for the deltoid is called the circumflex nerve. You may also call it the axillary nerve, but that is deltoid. The second independent one is from the inferior angle of the scapula. Its name is Teres Major. The word teres means round. It's the round muscle, and it's saying this is the large round muscle. So its origin is on this inferior angle, and then it is going to head anteriorly to attach to the lesser tubercle on the humerus. So it's coming to the anterior humerus, which means that it's going to work on extension, but its primary movements are this adduction and medial rotation. Those are the two to really worry about, adduction and medial rotation of the shoulder. And it has a more generalized innervation of just the brachial plexus. Coracobrachialis is actually a little tiny nerve, or a little tiny muscle in the shoulder. Its origin is on that coracoid process of the scapula, and its insertion is on the medial surface of the humerus. The action is flexion and adduction. So when I say it's small, it's from here on the coracoid process, which I just circled. It's muscle G, and it's really tiny. It's that big. I just outlined it in the red, so you can see where muscle G is and where those green arrows go. It has a different innervation because the body of this muscle actually goes into the arm itself. It gets the named nerve of the musculocutaneous nerve, which goes to the anterior compartment of the arm if you refer to the brachial plexus lecture. So that is coracobrachialis. It is an independent little muscle. It mostly works on flexion of the shoulder. And then we have the group shoulder muscles, which are called the rotator cuff muscles. There's a mnemonic for remembering who's in the rotator cuff. It's the SITS muscle. SIT stands for supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor now. Remember, it's minor, not major, and subscapularis. And all of these together function to stabilize the shoulder. Supraspinatus is going to stabilize superiorly. Infraspinatus and teres minor, and it looks like my computer dropped the word minor, stabilize posteriorly, and subscapularis stabilizes anteriorly. Notice that there's no stabilization in the inferior direction, which means that it is the easiest location to dislocate the shoulder is inferiorly. And usually that happens when somebody has their hands raised over their head. The head of the shoulder will just pop out inferiorly and laterally as the arm is raised. So let's look at these muscles independently. Supraspinatus origin is in the supraspinous fossa. So the fossa is named for the muscle and the muscle is named for the fossa. On the model in the lab, it will be tagged A, which was easy. And the insertion is on that greater tubercle of the humerus. 3 out of the 4 of these muscles do go to the greater tubercle. And the action is it does stabilize superiorly, but it also abducts the shoulder. Now, supraspinatus and deltoid are synergists because deltoid abducts. Supraspinatus is what we call the initiator of the motion. It starts the motion, and then deltoid gives it the power. If somebody has a torn rotator cuff, where supraspinatus is the muscle torn, they won't be able to abduct very well because they can't start the motion. And the innervation is simply the brachial plexus. Infraspinatus is larger. It comes all the way from the infraspinatus fossa. So it's much larger. It's muscle B on this model. So again, the fossa is named for the muscle. The muscle is named for the fossa, infraspinatus. It also attaches to the greater tubercle of the humerus, but because it is posterior, it's going to laterally rotate the shoulder. This is the one that a lot of baseball pitchers end up tearing because of the force of the lateral rotation. Its innervation is also the brachial plexus. Teres minor, remember I said that teres meant round? This is the small round muscle. It's tagged C on this model. You can see it here as I'm outlining it. Teres minor is also from the infraspinous fossa and the lateral border, so it basically tucks into the edge of the infraspinous fossa. It also goes to the greater tubercle, slightly inferior to infraspinatus. It is an absolute synergist to infraspinatus. It rotates the shoulder laterally. These two always work together. So infraspinatus and teres minor, synergist, and they stabilize the same direction posteriorly. However, it gets one thing different. It, like deltoid, gets this circumflex nerve. The circumflex nerve can also be called the axillary nerve, but these two muscles, teres minor and deltoid, share a nerve. Subscapularis is the 4th muscle. It's the only one from the anterior of the scapula. So the subscapular fossa is on the anterior of the scapula, and it is also going to go to the lesser tubercle, not the greater tubercle. So it's the odd one out. It's anterior, it goes to the lesser tubercle, and so therefore it stabilizes anteriorly, and it is the medial rotator. So it works a lot with teres major because teres major also goes to that lesser tubercle, and it will come anterior. The innervation is the brachial plexus. That is the end of the shoulder muscles.